Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video we've got a couple of things to discuss, including a couple of signings, including those arbitration cases from over the weekend that have now been announced. We also have a huge retirement from the Boston Bruins, an unexpected one, but a big one nonetheless. We'll talk about a few more buyouts that could be happening over the next couple of days, as well as a couple of big trade rumors involving the Boston Bruins, the Sharks possibly moving Erik Karlsson, and the trickle-down effect that a Karlsson move will have on the NHL. I'm going to do all that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey Channel. Now, I'll kick things off today with a couple of signings that have happened from the NHL. We're going to start with the arbitration signings that have happened. So, as we know, Philip Kurashev had his arbitration hearing on Thursday. There was also an arbitration hearing for Samsonov on Friday. We were expecting an announcement for Kurashev on Saturday. They didn't come. It was a little bit surprising, but it was announced Sunday morning, as was Samsonov. So, both those teams were able to get their official arbitration hearings done. And both of them are actually pretty decent, in my opinion at least. So for Kurashev, we know Kurashev was asking for a one-year deal at a $2.6 million cap hit. We know the Chicago Blackhawks were looking for a 2-year deal at a $1.4 million cap hit. And the arbitrator came to the decision of giving Kurashev a 2-year deal with AAV of $2.25 million. So definitely, the AAV is way closer to what Kurashev wanted than to what the Chicago Blackhawks wanted. So Kurashev definitely won the arbitration case. At $2.25 million, I think that's a decent amount of money for Kurashev. I know there are a couple people who didn't like the deal as much, but Kurashev was a middle six forward with not too much good talent around him in that middle six, and he was able to put up 25 points. So if he can continue to build off this, maybe with a little bit more NHL level talent that the Hawks have now, maybe if he can continue to be a good middle six forward, he can have between 30 and 40 points over the next couple of years. I think 30 to 40 points for a $2.25 million player is not too bad. So if Kurashev can continue to do well and can put up between 30 and 40 points, I think he can definitely step into this contract well. So I do like the $2.25 million cap hit. The Hawks do get the 2 years that they wanted, so they're going to keep him for the next couple of years. They don't have to worry about another contract negotiation next year, so that's another really good thing for the Hawks. So some pretty good moves there for the Hawks. I really do like that deal. Hawks get the 2 years that they want. It's closer to the AAV that Kurashev wanted at 2.25, and I think it's an all-around good deal. Kurashev should continue to be a really good middle six forward for the Blackhawks. The other arbitration case that we were talking about was Samsonov. The Maple Leafs went to arbitration with Samsonov on Friday, and on Sunday the arbitrator announced that he would get a 1-year contract with an AAV of $3.55 million. So that's nearly right down the middle. Samsonov was looking for a $4.9 million cap hit. The Leafs were looking for $2.4 million cap hit. Right down the middle would have been 3.65, so it's a little bit more towards the team side. So you could say that the team won the arbitration case, but it's really close. It's right down the middle almost. So I think this is basically a split. Samsonov, I think, is definitely worth $3.55 million. I know there were a lot of people out there who thought he could be worth $4 million. So in that term, I think Toronto definitely got the win here to not only win the arbitration case, but get Samsonov's AAV below $4 million. He's going to be a fantastic start for next year, but the one thing this does is walk Samsonov to free agency. So it's going to be interesting to see if Samsonov has another great year like he did this year, and he starts to show that he can definitely be doing this on a consistent level. I could see another team give him maybe $5.5 million in next year's free agent market, especially given the fact that I think Samsonov could easily be the second best goalie available next year besides Connor Hellebuyck. So definitely going to be interesting to see, but I do like the Samsonov deal. I think that for a cap-strapped team like the Leafs, that's a really good contract. Samsonov should definitely be the team starter next year, and at that money, I think he could definitely excel. So that's a really good deal for the Leafs, I think, in my opinion. They win the arbitration case, and they sign him for under $4 million. Kurashev, really good middle six forward. I think the $2.25 million cap is pretty good. And I think those two are really good signings for the Hawks and the Leafs. So those two arbitration cases are done. As we said, the next arbitration cases are not until this upcoming Sunday, when the Bruins have one scheduled with Jeremy Swayman and the Arizona Coyotes have one scheduled with Jack McBain. So going to be interesting to see. But those are the two arbitration cases that have been finished now. One big UFA signing that could have some potential significant ramifications on an Erik Karlsson trade, and that is that the Carolina Hurricanes have signed Tony DeAngelo to a 1-year deal with AAV of $1.675 million, and he'll be going to start next year. Now, for DeAngelo, He was bought out about a week and a half ago by the Philadelphia Flyers when there was no trade that materialized between the Flyers and the Canes. There was a lot of talk late June, early July that there was a handshake deal in place between the Canes and the Flyers to send DeAngelo to Carolina for a late pick or prospect, and that deal had to come after July 8th because it had to happen 1 year after the trade happened last year that sent him to Philadelphia. And it never materialized. It happened a couple days later. The Flyers just got impatient. It seemed like Carolina was working on a Karlsson deal, Pesce deal, and they had other business ahead of a DeAngelo deal, so Philly cut their ties and they bought him out. DeAngelo became a UFA. A lot of people thought that DeAngelo would definitely be a guy to sign with Carolina, given all the speculation that he was going there. But it sounded like Carolina was still in on Karlsson, so they never really signed him. And now they have officially come to terms on a 1-year deal. So it's going to be interesting to see. This is going to be the second stint for DeAngelo in Carolina organization. Last year, he had a decent season, putting up 43 points in 70 games with the Philadelphia Flyers. But 2 years ago, he was with the Carolina Hurricanes and had his second best point total in his career, putting up 10 goals and 51 points in only 64 games. So I would expect, depending on what happens with Pesce, if Pesce's moved and the Canes do indeed trade him before the start of the season, I expect DeAngelo to be a second pair defenseman, probably with Dmitry Orlov. If Pesce does not move before the start of the season, I could definitely see DeAngelo maybe start as the third pair defenseman with maybe like a Brady Shea. But either way, he's either going to be a second or third pair defenseman. I think he could easily quarterback the second power play unit and could really help that defense become a little more offensive. So really good signing there for the Canes. DeAngelo's going to be a really good offensive defenseman for them, and I expect him to really thrive in a role in Carolina like he did a couple of years ago. So some solid signings there for the Hurricanes to get DeAngelo signed. The one question that I will discuss a little bit later when we talk about Karlsson is, does this put the Hurricanes out of the Karlsson race? I think it might have some pretty significant implications for that, but I'm going to talk about that a little bit later in the video. So those are the three signings that have happened over the past little while. Next, we want to go on to something that just happened before I started this video. Now, as I was talking about last week, there were about 5 situations that were really holding up everything in the market. The Lindholm contract, the negotiations in Calgary. Does he wind up staying and signing an extension, or will he say he's not signing an extension, and will they wind up trading him? And once that decision's made, Hanafin and Backlund will most likely be dealt. So the Lindholm situation is holding up business in Calgary. We said that Nylander's situation is also holding up some business. Nylander's a solid top 6 winger. If the Leafs can't come to terms before the season starts, there's a very likely possibility that they will have to trade him. And I think for a lot of teams, adding Nylander, who's this lethal top 6 winger, would be a major improvement to that team. So a lot of teams could have keeping like a roster spot and some cap space open to try and go after Nylander if he doesn't sign an extension with Toronto. That's another thing that's holding up the trading market. Karlsson possibly being dealt at some point is also holding up the trade market. We also said that Tarasenko, the biggest of the UFAs still remaining, once he signs, I would expect a trickle-down effect where some of those lower-end players sign. But until Tarasenko signs, I don't expect any of those guys to sign. So, once again, another trickle-down effect. And the Boston Bruins had confirmation that Bergeron and Krejci would retire past this season. And until there was a confirmation that both one or both are going to retire, the Bruins are not going to go out and trying to get a top-line center to replace them until then. So there was a lot, like I said, those were the 5 situations that were really holding up the market. We got confirmation on one of the 2 Boston Bruins centers, and it was their longtime captain, Patrice Bergeron, as Bergeron is officially retired from the NHL and called it a career one day after he turned 38. So really interesting. I don't think this causes much surprise. There was a lot of talk that Krejci was almost certain to retire, or at least go back to play in Czechia for maybe another year or 2. But Bergeron was the wild card in this, and there was a lot of talk that maybe Bergeron would come back for one more season, maybe he would retire. But I put out a statement just before I started recording this video discussing how he's decided to call it a career. So going to be interesting to see what Boston does moving forward. Bergeron had one heck of a career. He was a second-round pick back in the 2003 draft of the Boston Bruins. He started playing in the 05-06 season, helped the Bruins to Stanley Cup all the way back in 2011. That was a really big moment for the Bruins there to win that Stanley Cup. I think the Bruins got to the Stanley Cup a couple of times as well. I think they got to the Stanley Cup in either 2013 or 2010 against the Blackhawks and lost. Not exactly sure which one they got to and which one the Flyers got to. but they got there. They also lost to the St. Louis Blues in 2019, so Bergeron helped them get to the Cup multiple times, helped them win the Cup in 2011, so he definitely has a Stanley Cup to his name. He's put up multiple good seasons. He's had a couple of 70-point seasons. He's had a couple of 60-point seasons over his career. The past couple of years, he hasn't been able to hit the 70 mark, but he still put up 60, 50, 40 points. He's still been a really solid two-way center. He won multiple Selke trophies for being one of the better two-way forwards of the game. I think he won the Selke trophy like 6 times or some crazy amount. So he was a really, really good two-way forward and probably one of the best in the NHL over his career. Definitely, I think Bergeron had a fantastic career. Points-wise, he came back this year to play, and he was able to hit the 1,000 point mark. So at the end of his career, he's had 427 goals, coupled with 613 assists for a grand total of 1,040 points. And after a 58-point season this year, so he was able to hit the 1,000 point mark earlier this year, and he winds up finishing with 1,040 points in 1,294 games. So definitely a very successful career for Bergeron, over 1,000 points, over 1,000 games played. He's held multiple Selke trophies. He helped the Bruins win the Stanley Cup. He helped the Bruins get to multiple Stanley Cup finals. He's just had a really great career. So sad to see Bergeron go, and sad to see they won't have number 37, their captain, be there next year. So it's been a really good long career for Bergeron, but he now calls it quits. So I think that will open up a possibility of Boston making a move after their ARB cases. We'll get to that in a second. But definitely, Bergeron retiring is now official, and he's now done in the NHL. So going to be interesting to see what's next for Bergeron, but as a lot of people were expecting, Bergeron's retired, and he will not be going back to Boston as their top-line center. So going to be interesting to see. Still no word on Krejci officially yet, but if Bergeron's retiring, it's quite possible Krejci could retire too, and if that happens, then the Bruins are left without their top 2 centers. So we'll get to some of that in a second, but Bergeron's retired, and after a really long career and a really great career, playing multiple seasons only with the Boston Bruins, helping them get to the Stanley Cup final, win a Stanley Cup, he's now called a career. So definitely interesting to see, but Bergeron is now no longer in the NHL after he retires. So that's the big retirement I want to talk about here today. Just a couple quick buyout options. So we went over the weekend. The Vegas Golden Knights, the Winnipeg Jets, the Colorado Avalanche, Tampa Bay Lightning, and St. Louis Blues all went over the past couple of days with their buyout windows. None of them bought out anyone. So I don't find it too surprising that the Avalanche and Bolts didn't buy out anyone. I didn't expect them to. I said if the Knights didn't have Leonard as being healthy, then they would probably not buy out anyone. So it seems like Leonard's not healthy right now, so that's most likely why I didn't buy out anyone. I am a little bit surprised that the Jets didn't consider buying out Schmitz, or the Blues didn't consider buying out Krug or Leddy or Saad, but they didn't. So the Blues, Jets didn't buy out anyone, and I think not surprisingly the Knights, the Avalanche, and the Bolts wind up not buying out anyone. So interesting stuff. We are currently in the buyout window for the Seattle Kraken. After they signed Vince Dunn, last night they got a new buyout window, so they could buy out anyone either today or tomorrow. I wouldn't be too shocked, like I said, if they bought out a guy like Alex Wenberg, but besides that, I don't really see him buying out anyone. So it's going to be interesting to see, but Wenberg really is the only possibility I see for the Kraken. And with the Leafs and Blackhawks now having their arbitration cases done, they both get a 24-hour buyout window. I'm pretty sure both get one on Wednesday and should get one until Friday. So going to be interesting to see, but I expect them to possibly at least consider a buyout. Now, if you look at the buyout possibilities for the Leafs, they have Jake McCabe. They just acquired him at the trade line. They're not buying him out. They have Klingberg and Tyler Bertuzzi. They just signed those two guys. They're not buying them out. They're not buying out any of their core 4 players. They're not buying out Morgan Riley. And Jake Muzzin's injured right now, so they can't buy him out. So the only 2 options are Matt Murray and TJ Brody. Buying out Brody gives them the full $5 million of Brody's cap hit off their books for this year. Plus, it gives them a $2.5 million cap penalty for next year. Buying out Murray gives them about $4 million, and the Senators about $1.3 million off of their books. And then for this year, and then the Leafs would have a $2 million cap penalty for next year, with the Sens having a $600,000 cap penalty for next year. So once again, Murray, Brody both entering the final year of their deals. I think there's a very likely chance that at least one of those 2 is bought out. There's been a lot of talk recently that Murray is not going to be healthy possibly, and if he's not healthy, he can't be bought out. So it's going to be interesting to see if Murray is bought out, or if he'll have to start the season on long-term injury reserve, or if the Leafs possibly move him before the season starts. For Brody, getting his full cap hit off would make him a very likely buyout candidate, but he's still a really good top 4 defender of the Leafs. So interesting to see. But I expect one of Brody or Murray to possibly be bought out here during this window. If they're not, I wouldn't be too shocked, but I definitely think it's really a likely possibility for the Leafs. As for the Hawks, they don't really have much in the way of possible buyout options. They just signed Corey Perry, they just signed Nick Foligno, Anthony Seo. They're not buying any of them out. Thess Jones, Taylor Hall, they're not buying either of them out. Neither are they buying out Murphy. So the only options they have are Tyler Johnson and Nikita Zaitsev, as I talked about before. Zaitsev only saves them just over $1 million for this upcoming season, and leaves them with an $800,000 cap penalty for next year. So not an ideal situation, and I think it's very likely to just keep Zaitsev on the roster. Buying out Tyler Johnson gives them $3.1 million in cap space for this upcoming season and a 1.5 cap penalty for next year. So once again, I wouldn't be too shocked if the Blackhawks didn't buy out anyone, given the fact that they have the most cap space out of any of those teams. If they were to buy out someone else, I think it would be Johnson or Zaitsev, but I would not be too shocked at all if they went through the buy window and didn't buy out anyone else. So I think watching out for Seattle over the next couple of days as a possible buyout option. They could buy out Wenberg starting Wednesday to Friday. Both the Leafs and the Hawks have a buyout window. So like I said, will not be too shocking to me if the Leafs bought out one of Brody or Murray. And while I don't think the Hawks will probably buy out anyone, if they were to, it'll be one of Tyler Johnson or Nikita Zaitsev. So going to be interesting to see, but I think those are the only real buyout options over this period of time. Like we said, we still have a couple of signings left. Arbitration cases still need to get done, so it's going to be interesting to see, but there's definitely going to be a couple of teams who also have some more buyout windows opening in the not just in the future. And next, let's finish off here with the trade room part of the video. Now, I'm going to go quickly here with Boston before we get to Erik Karlsson. As we just talked about, Bergeron retired, so that's their top line center that is officially not going to be back for the Bruins next year. And there's a very good likely chance that Krejci decides to call it a career as well and does not come back to Boston. So it's going to be interesting to see, but that's the Bruins' top 2 centers. At this current point in time, their top 2 centers are Pavel Zacha and Charlie Coyle. Coyle, not the best of second-line centers. They brought him in to be a second-line center. He's more of a third-line center, and Zacha is definitely nowhere close to being a first-line center. He could be a decent second-line center, but he's not a first-line center. So with the news that Bergeron's now gone, and now it being set in stone that he's not going to be back next year, I really do think there's a likely chance that the Boston Bruins will be going out and trying to acquire a top-line center. I see a couple of reports recently saying that Boston may go after Elias Lindholm before they go after Mark Scheifele, which I think is a likely possibility, just given the fact that Lindholm's, I think, in my opinion, better than Scheifele, and he also comes at a cheaper price tag for this upcoming season. So it's going to be interesting to see, but like I said in a couple of recent videos, Lindholm, Scheifele, maybe even Kuznetsov could all be of interest to the Boston Bruins, and I think if it could help them improve that team, I would not be too shocked if the Bruins tried to improve their center depths. The one problem they do have is they have very little amount of cap space right now, and they don't really have much room to work with. They still have the Swayman arbitration case, they still have the Frederick arbitration case, so not surprising at all if they went through to those 2 arbitration cases before they tried to do anything else. But after those 2, I could definitely see them trying to get a top-line center. So whether it's Lindholm, whether it's Scheifele, whether it's Kuznetsov, whether it's another center, I definitely do see the Bruins trying to add a top-line center. If they can get a top-line center, they can have a top-line center, and then Zacha is 2, Coyle 3, which I think will be okay for the Bruins for next year. So it will not be the Bergeron-Krejci 1-2 punch they would have had over the last number of years, but it would be definitely a decent upgrade. So once again, I think Swayman's contract and Frederick's contract will play a big role in what happens, but it would not surprise me at all if they maybe tried to move out Jake DeBrusk, who has a $4 million cap hit, maybe try and move Matt Grzelcyk with a $3.6 million cap hit, and then try and go after a Elias Lindholm or a Mark Scheifele. So with the news of Bergeron retiring, I would not be too shocked if in the next couple of weeks at some point the Boston Bruins were to try and go after a top-line center. Next, going over to Erik Karlsson. There's been a lot of talk over the past couple of days about Erik Karlsson. Now, Karlsson apparently was talking on an interview he was doing in Sweden after accepting an award over in Sweden, and he talked a lot about him being his possible trade options. He said that he does not really want to go back to San Jose. He says he wants to try and, as early as this year's training camp, know that he's going to be in a situation where he can go and have a chance to win. So it sounds like he does not want to, under any circumstances, go back to San Jose. So it sounds like he really does want to try and have a trade done before training camp. And on top of that, he did actually say that he's talked to 4 different teams. Now, we know that he's talked to Pittsburgh, he's talked to Carolina. That's not too surprising. Those have been the 2 teams already mentioned a whole bunch of times. But he also mentioned talking to teams like the Seattle Kraken and the Toronto Maple Leafs. So now, going into the possibilities of all these, I have actually done a blog post talking about this. I gave mock trades for all 4 of these different teams and what trades I think could help those teams acquire Erik Karlsson. So definitely, I'll let you check that out. I'll leave a link down in the description below. So definitely check that out. I leave a mock draft for Pittsburgh, Carolina, Seattle, and Toronto. So definitely check that out, as I definitely did a couple of mock trades just discussing, in my opinion, what I think could be a good trade package for Karlsson. But just going over the fit and what could possibly happen, we know Pittsburgh's a really good fit. We know Pittsburgh's a really likely option. Before this, it was sounding like Pittsburgh was starting to become the front runner. I still think Pittsburgh's most likely landing spot for Karlsson. They have a solid core group, and most of those players are in the same age range as Erik Karlsson. They add Karlsson to the team. They can put him on the second line with a guy like Ryan Graves. That could be a really good second pair for the Penguins. Letang has even said that he would be willing to move and let Karlsson take over the quarterback role in the first power play unit. So he's willing to let Karlsson have the reins on the power play, which is something he really likes. Definitely being the quarterback of the power play will definitely help his point total, and it seems like Pittsburgh could definitely be a solid option for him, as long as they can make the cap work, because they will most likely have to move Petrie, maybe buy out Granlund, and then have the San Jose Sharks eat some money on that contract. So it's going to be interesting to see, but I think Pittsburgh's still a very likely option. The one thing that a lot of people I've seen think is that the Pittsburgh Penguins can't really make the best offer. They do have a couple of first-round picks. They can move, like, maybe next year's first-round pick. They do have a couple of decent prospects, like a Brayden Yager or Nolan Pickering, but do they really want to move those top-end prospects? They could definitely move a guy like Ty Smith or Pierre-Olivier Joseph or Sam Poulin, who are lower-end first-round picks from a couple of years ago, but I definitely think it's quite possible that the Penguins couldn't put together the best package, but I think they'll definitely have the most interest, and it's the most likely landing spot, in my opinion, for Karlsson. For Carolina, like I said, DeAngelo just signed with the Hurricanes. I don't think the Hurricanes go after DeAngelo unless they're out on Karlsson. Now, there was already a lot of speculation that Karlsson would not be the greatest fit in Carolina, given the fact that he would go right back to the place where Brent Burns was. Burns and Karlsson do not work overly well in San Jose together, both wanting to be number 1 defenseman and both wanting to be quarterbacking power play unit number 1, stuff like that. Once they got the separation, Karlsson had 100-point season and Burns did fantastic in Carolina. So I don't really see the fit for Karlsson in Carolina. Once again, I think they have a solid group right now. If they were to acquire Karlsson, that bumped down DeAngelo to line 3, and I don't expect DeAngelo to be playing on pair 3 if they brought him in to be a good offensive defenseman. So they can use Burns on power play unit 1, DeAngelo on power play unit number 2. They can have both of them be 2 top 4 defensemen. And I think, in my opinion, Carolina's out of the running. I don't think it made sense before for Carolina to go after Karlsson, and I think after the DeAngelo signing, it just makes even less sense now. So, in my opinion, while they will not be saying it probably publicly, I do think Carolina is most likely not going to acquire Karlsson. Toronto, same sort of thing. I really think it's a very long shot for them to acquire Karlsson. A lot of people do think that if Karlsson were to go to Toronto, Nylander would have to go back. I said this in my blog post talking about a mock trade to Toronto. He would have to not only possibly be traded to San Jose, Nylander would probably also have to agree to a contract extension. I'm not sure if he would want to sign in San Jose. I think it's possible. I think he could be the guy in San Jose, whereas he's like the 3rd or 4th guy in Toronto. But I do think it's very, very unlikely. Toronto already has a couple of solid defensemen. It will be really hard to put Karlsson on that team as well. I mean, they could definitely do it. He could be like a top pair player with a guy like Jake McCabe, and I think that would work out really good. But I just think it'll be really, really difficult for the Leafs to do, both from a cap perspective and from the perspective that they would have to move William Nylander. So it'll be really, really difficult, and they have to have Nylander have a contract extension with San Jose, which I'm not sure he will want to do. So it's definitely interesting to see, but I really don't think that Toronto is a great fit, at least at this point, for Karlsson, even though I've seen that mentioned a couple of times on social media. So it's going to be interesting to see, but I don't expect Toronto. The one team I do think could be a really under-the-radar possible good option for him would be the Seattle Kraken. There was some talk around the free agent frenzy that at the start of the free agent period that the Kraken were interested, but over time it sounded like they were out on him. Elliot Friedman even said on one of his podcasts that they were out on him, but they really took a good run at him before saying they were out. But I definitely think that if the price lowered, maybe they got back in. If they could get San Jose to eat anywhere to drop his contract to between $7.5 and $8.5 million, I think that would work enough for Seattle to make it work. They move a couple of contracts like a Drieger or a Schultz or a Wenberg, like a possible buyout option. They move those guys. That frees up over $11 million if they moved all three of those guys. They have the prospects to intrigue San Jose. Out of any of those teams, Carolina, Pittsburgh, Toronto, Seattle has by far the best prospect pool. They've definitely had a lot of solid picks. Even some of their third-round picks over the past couple of years have been steals, that players that should have gone in round 2. So there's a lot of good prospect talent in Seattle, and they also have still pretty good draft capital as well. So Seattle may be able to give the Sharks the best package, but I still think Pittsburgh is the team who's most likely going to land Karlsson. So I think those are two teams who are most likely. I definitely think Toronto's a very, very unlikely team to land Karlsson, and I think especially after DeAngelo signing, I can't see Karlsson going to Carolina anymore. But I definitely do think that teams like Pittsburgh and Seattle definitely have an opportunity to land Karlsson. So definitely interesting to see, but it sounds like he's talking to a couple of teams here, and there's a couple of options for him to finally go out of San Jose, and he sounds like he definitely wants to go out of San Jose. What this could mean for a trickle-down effect, just quickly here. Once Karlsson's traded, I think there's definitely going to be a trickle-down effect. I think two really key defensemen are being held up in trade talks right now because of a Karlsson trade, and that is Brett Pesce and Noah Hanafin. Hanafin has been a player who has been mentioned in trade talks all throughout this offseason, and a player who I think the Flames would really want to move on, given the fact he said he's absolutely not going back to Calgary. So I think once Karlsson's moved, some of the teams who missed out on him, plus a couple of other teams like a Buffalo or a Florida, I've even seen Boston be mentioned as well, could go after a guy like Hanafin. Brett Pesce in Carolina most likely doesn't have a spot now after the DeAngelo signing. They still have a couple of good third-pair defensemen in Chatfield and Coughlin, so we're not surprised at all if Pesce was moved at some point. If Pesce's moved, the Canes could possibly bring in like a scoring forward, which I think could help them. And I think teams like maybe Seattle or Toronto or some other teams like maybe Vancouver could have interest in Pesce. So I think there's definitely a possibility that as soon as the Karlsson deal happens, some of these teams who missed out on him could go after a guy like Hanafin, could go after a guy like Pesce. I also think there's very likely a chance that even if they don't acquire Karlsson, that after a Karlsson deal happens, the Penguins move on from Petrie, try and trade him to maybe a guy like the Anaheim Ducks. I think there's a very likely chance after the Sharks move on from Karlsson, a guy like Tyler Myers in Vancouver goes. I think once those guys are traded too, I think that'll open the door for teams with crowded blue lines in Winnipeg and Columbus. Columbus has, I think, 8 or 9 really good defensemen, and they'd have to put 1 or 2 of them on waivers. Same sort of thing in Winnipeg. I don't think they want to put all those guys on waivers, so I think they could try and move a blue liner. I think after Karlsson deal happens, after some of those other guys are moved, that could open the door for those guys in Winnipeg or Columbus to be moved. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see, but I think Karlsson, most likely to Pittsburgh, maybe to Seattle, given the fact they can offer maybe what would be considered the best package. Or maybe there's another team out there who hasn't been mentioned that could possibly go out and get Karlsson. And then once Karlsson's moved, I think trickle-down effect, as I think Pesce could be moved, Hanafin could be moved, Petrie could be moved, Myers could be moved, as well as maybe some defensemen in Winnipeg and Columbus. So definitely interesting to see, but I think once Karlsson's dealt, and once he finds his new home, it will be a trickle-down effect. But some of these teams miss out on getting Karlsson, will go after guys like Hanafin and Pesce. So, going to be interesting to see, but definitely it sounds like Karlsson's talking to a few teams, and it sounds like a trade out of San Jose is extremely likely and will happen most likely before training camp and will lead to other trades happening involving top-end defensemen. So, going interesting to see. That's all I'm going to talk about for today, but I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. What do you think of Bergeron officially retiring? I think he's had a great career, probably one of the best Bruins ever. Definitely, in my opinion, a lock for the Hockey Hall of Fame, so definitely it's been a really great career for Bergeron. And while it's expected that he was going to retire, it's quite sad to see him go. I think we definitely could have a couple of buyouts, depending on what happens in those circumstances. So definitely going interesting to see on that side. Definitely let me know what you think down in the comments on Boston, with Bergeron now being retired. Do they go after a guy like Lindholm? Do they go after a guy like Scheifele? I think it's extremely likely. And which team do you think gets Karlsson? In my opinion, I still think it's Pittsburgh. I could see Seattle. I don't see it in Carolina. I think it'd be too difficult to work out for Toronto, so maybe there's another team out there who would work as well. So going to be interesting to see, but I think Pittsburgh's still the most likely, in my opinion, to get Karlsson. And do you also think there's a very likely chance that some of these teams to miss out on Karlsson could go after a Hanafin, or a Pesce, or a Petrie, or a Myers, or one of those depth pieces on the Jackets or Jets organizations? I think it's definitely a very likely chance. So it's going to be interesting to see. Once again, love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. But that's all I'm going to talk about for today. Remember to like this video, and if you really liked it, remember to subscribe down below. I also do a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis, mock trade like I just did with Karlsson, so definitely check that out. I'll leave a link to that in the description below, and I can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.